Hi, this is Carrie Brownstein.
This is DJ Permian.
This is Darren Aronofsky.
You got the RZA right here.
Rose McGowan.
Radiohead.
Aisha Tyler.
Tribe Called Quest. Fred Armisen. Fritz Paul.
Javier Munoz, Seth Meyers.
Frankie Cosmos.
Flying Lotus.
Hi, we're Chaim, and you're listening to the Talkhouse Podcast. Ow!
Hello and welcome to the Talkhouse Podcast. I'm Josh Modell. On this week's episode, we've got two incredible singer-songwriters who sprung from the same fertile late 80s, early 90s scene and who are still doing it right all these years later. Joe Pernice and Bill Janovitz. Now, Joe Pernice first found notice in the countryish pop band Scud Mountain Boys, whose home-recorded records landed them a deal with Sub Pop in the mid-1990s. The Scuds weren't around super long, but their end was the beginning of the Pernice Brothers, Joe's long-running band that continues to put out excellent, often melancholy songs. The latest Pernice Brothers album, and by the way, he's really the only constant member at this point, is called Who Will You Believe? And it stands up there with his incredibly durable catalog. In addition to writing and playing songs, Pernice wrote a great novel a while back called It Feels So Good When I Stop, and he even had a short stint writing for TV. But for now, he's concentrating on music. Check out a little bit of December in Her Eyes from Who Will You Believe?
Sorry, man, I can be so long-winded and no good at talking on the phone. I really should have dragged myself downtown to see you, but
The other half of today's conversation, Bill Janovitz, has been the singer and guitar player for the band Buffalo Tom since that band's inception back in 1986. And while there have been quieter periods in there, they've consistently released records, including the new Jump Rope, which comes out May 31st. Buffalo Tom came out of the same incredible Boston/Amherst music scene that birthed Pernice Brothers, Pixies, Dinosaur Jr. and Sebadoh, and many more. And these guys dive right into reminiscing about those fertile days. In addition to making music, Janovitz is also something of a rock historian, having written the comprehensive Leon Russell book in recent years, as well as a volume on the Rolling Stones. His next book is about the Cars, which these guys talk about during this chat as well. Check out a little bit of the song Helmet from the upcoming album Jump Rope right here.
put your helmet on.
Like I said, these guys dive back into the Boston days, talking about mutual friends and collaborators like Jay Mascis and David Berman of Silver Jews. They also try to remember their first encounters, one of which involves Pernice being a little ornery, and they talk about selecting songs for records and how they never know which ones people are going to react to. Enjoy.
There's something very singular about the way you tell stories and your use of like almost neologisms. If even that's how you pronounce it, neologisms, like not necessarily new words, but how you use words in storytelling and in telling jokes. But were your parents really funny?
My mother's pretty funny. My old man's pretty funny too, but not as often. Like he has a good sense of humor. He has a very good hit percentage. He just doesn't swing that often.
Oh, okay.
But when he does, he hits. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, but he has a good vocabulary. I guess people should probably know we've known each other since I thought back to when I first met you, and I'm going to say it was 1986. We both went to UMass Amherst. I remember the really early meeting you.
That's right. So what year did you graduate high school? Same year as me? 84?
85. I'm a year younger than you.
We don't need to dwell on that.
You ended up in Medfield, Massachusetts, right? From New York.
Yeah. I moved to Medfield from New York when I was like 16, and it was a brutal move. I was already in bands, and I've complained about it publicly as often as I possibly can. But at the end of the day, as these things often work out, it proved to be one of the greatest things. I mean, it was hard because I came from being in bands since I was like 12 or 13 years old, and lifelong friends in this great town on the North Shore of Long Island called Huntington, with beaches and record stores and amazing pizza and bowling alleys and video games, all the things you want as a teenager, and places to play music, in fact. And so, I don't know, the summer before my junior year of high school, I moved, and I didn't get to know anybody until high school started, except for a couple of weirdos in the neighborhood who are still kind of friends of mine. But it was really when I started high school that fall that I got to know Rich, Tim Donovan, Jay Tallerman, these guys that are like I still get together with them.
Still your friends.
So you were born and raised in, is it Holbrook or?
Holbrook, yeah, south of Boston, about, I don't know, what's it, 15 miles or so south. And I went to UMass, in '85. And
Yeah.
I don't think I had aspirations to be a musician, though. Did you think when you were at UMass that you would be in a band?
I kind of got lucky hooking up with Buffalo Tom. But yeah, I mean, I wasn't proficient enough, nor did I have the aspirations to be like a pro guitar player. Like I was never one of the better guitar players. I was always pretty good. But we grew up in this era of like, people would make fun of Keith Richards or even Jerry Garcia, which is weird. I remember Keith Richards or Neil Young. Oh, it's primitive or this. But then sort of punk rock happened. And so virtuosity wasn't as much of a thing, and songs were always a thing, right? But I didn't want to go. My whole point is I didn't want to go to Berkeley.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would have gotten into Berkeley. So I didn't want to major in music, but I wanted to be in a band. It's the only thing I know of that since I was a kid, that I'm doing the things I always wanted to do. I always wanted to be in a band, and I always wanted to write. Those are the only things I'm somewhat decent at.
I don't think I touched an instrument until I was about 16 or so. So I didn't even start playing music at all. Like my brother, who's 5 years older than me, has been playing guitar since he was 6.
I didn't realize he was 5 years.
I think I was about 16 years old. I got a bass because I wanted to play, and I picked it up pretty quickly. And I think I started playing in bands right away. And it was coming out of that, like listening to The Clash. And I wasn't a huge Sex Pistols fan, but I liked The Clash a lot. I liked The Jam a lot. Yeah. I went to university to be an engineer because I was into bikes and motors and all that shit, and I wanted to be an engineer. But then that was a long, circuitous route. But I think I never wanted to be in a touring band. And then, as you know, my cousin Joe Harvard, who had Fort Apache, then I got to go in and record probably in, I don't know. I think I first made a recording before he started the Fort, he had it set up in his apartment in Cambridge. So I went to his house when I was a senior in high school. So I was probably 17, and I played with some people, and he had an 8-track set up. So those were my first recordings. And then I got to go into the studio when he started, where you guys recorded. How many records did you record? Where was Bird Brain made?
I guess we did start that at South. Yeah, we did start that at South. And then I think they were transitioning to Fort Apache North. So people should know your cousin is a legend around these parts, especially from that era, people that knew that era. And he was like a real catalyst, just like a lot of those guys were, even before the studio, but certainly once Joe and Gary Smith, who we just had a memorial for here, and Sean Slade and Paul Coldery, Lou Giordano, Tim O'Hare, once these guys really it was sort of a cooperative, they put their shit together literally in to make the equipment in the studio at Fort Apache South, which was in Roxbury. It was just called Fort Apache. They went out to North Cambridge with the old Rounder Record Studio. And that was the great studio, that spot.
You made the first whole album there, right?
Yeah. We started making demos, and we actually started that record before Jay Mascis came in. So yeah, for us that went to UMass, people think, oh, you guys, you came out of the Scuds, us, Sebado, Pixies, but that's sort of like, we know that this is a bit of mythology, because the only real band that was formed in Amherst that's not true. Let me back up. But we were all just sort of like kids. I remember coming up and visiting Jay Tallerman, because they were a year ahead of me when I was a senior in high school, coming up to UMass and meeting Jay at that point through Jay Tallerman, just to meet Jay Mascis. And he was already this complete enigma. He had like this sort of birthday party, Nick Cave and the birthday party hair and beads. And I'm like, whoa, who's this guy? He barely said anything. It was like a compelling figure. And then they did You're Living All Over Me. And I'm like, it just blew my head off. I'm just like, the marriage of guitars, like the stuff that we grew up with, Neil Young, with Hendrix, Black Sabbath, whatever, with these melodies. And it was just, what a great group of songs.
For sure. I met Jay Mascis also in '85, and I'll never forget it because I went to a house party. My bet is you were there, but I didn't meet you in 85. And Jay was playing drums for somebody. I probably had like a 6-pack of like Moosehead beer with me. And I offered him a beer and he's like, no, I don't drink or anything like that. So it's really funny. But boy, he was something else.
There were these great times, but it was not a great scene up there because it was college. It was the 80s.
Yeah.
People did, if there were live bands, they wanted reggae or blues or things that made hippies dance and people spend money on beer. But there were a lot of great bands that came through there. Black Flag, Husker Du, Replacements. I saw Pixies and Flaming Lips at Sheehan's in the basement, and so many great bands that came through.
I saw the Throwing Muses. I saw the Mighty Lemon Drops, Violent Femmes. You might have said them. I saw tons of people there. Tons of people. So they got good music.
REM with the DVs opening.
What year was that? I think that was the year before me.
That would have been my freshman year. Yeah, 84. I said before I went to school there, I went to see Elvis Costello solo at the Fine Arts Center too, which was fantastic. So the reason we got into Jay is because we were like, wow, this guy, studios were so intimidating at that point, but we didn't know anything about Fort Apache. So I think we did know a little bit about Fort Apache because Tim O'Hare was in a band with Tom McGinnis called Plate of Mutton. And then they changed their name to Skylar Hinkle. And they were like, Tom McGinnis was playing bass in clubs when he was like 16 or 17.
I didn't know Tom and Tim were in a band together.
We all went up on winter break to Andover to see these guys playing Tom's mom's basement. It was just a bunch of dudes with beer, but they were playing these original songs. And it was, anyway, I was just these are kind of galvanizing moments where you can write your own songs and people will come and listen to them. And, it's all a bunch of dudes in the suburbs.
Yeah, sure.
But anyways, Jay said, you should come over to Fort Apache. I think they had recently opened and were becoming more of a thing. So we started doing demos there with Tim, and then Jay came in and did some subsequent sessions with Sean Slade. And that's kind of how that got.
What year?
I would have turned fall of 86 into 87. So summer 87, I think, is when we were there.
So you guys made a record pretty fast. You weren't together super long before you made the first album. Is that right?
That's kind of right. Yeah, somewhere in 87 we started doing. Well, I mean, we didn't have that record done until like 88. Did you switch from engineering to English pretty soon on?
In my third year, I dropped out. In the first semester of my third year, I was literally sitting in a lecture at like the Graduate Research Center. I got up from the lecture, went to the student union, bought a bus ticket, and literally didn't even go back to my room. And I just had a mild nervous breakdown, went to stay with my folks, got my shit in a pile, came back in 88 and just switched my major entirely. We had a band together and we played with you guys one show. It was outside at Logtown Road in Belchertown or Amherst. I'm not sure.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's a picture. We have a picture from there. Yeah.
It was May of 88. I think the first song you played was Under My Thumb, and the cops came and broke it up before you finished the song. That was it.
I probably wouldn't remember it had it not been for the photos, but yeah. So was this the Stadies that were playing?
That would have been the Stadies, yeah. But I don't think Spat was there that day. Yeah, we all wore like these big mirrored sunglasses.
The Stadies is that's one of my favorite band names of all time.
We never even wrote songs. Every gig, we only probably played 5 or 6 shows, and every single one was ad-libbed. The whole thing was madness. And we're probably all baked and, wasted off our trees.
All right, so let me ask you some questions. So how influential was Joe Harvard? Like, were you guys like a tight family? Was he around a lot?
Joe Harvard was my second cousin. He was my mother's cousin, but he was as old as my oldest sister. So he was always an older guy to me until I got into my late teens. So when I would go as a kid, whenever we'd go to East Boston to visit my grandmother, we always saw Joe's family too, because there was, they were literally shared a wall. An alleyway. And so I always saw him, and he was way into music. I remember, I was a kid, so it was scary. I remember going to at some 4th of July celebration, and him and his friends, this was probably 75 or something. They were playing at a stage somewhere, and it was it was scary, man. They probably were taking a bunch of meth and just being fucked up. I'd never seen live music and definitely never seen live rock and roll before. And, they were just high heel shoes and bell bottoms.
Yeah.
And he was always good about he gave me instruments and he gave me some stuff to record, like recording stuff. And he was always pretty cool in that way. But again, I wasn't really that into it until I think when I was graduating university, my last year, when I knew I was going to go for an MFA, I was going to go to graduate school. I started playing music with him more. We played a lot, my brother and Joe and I. I would go to Boston once a week and do a thing at the Plow and Stars.
I want to talk about this era of your life. So you were an engineering major, you switched over, and then had you always been into writing or reading?
No.
Were you well read?
No, reading is still difficult for me just because I have not dyslexia, but I have an ADHD that makes words on a page. I can't focus on them. So reading was always hard, which I think maybe that's why I got into reading poetry ultimately, because it was smaller, it was shorter, and for some reason it grabbed me. But I took an English class, I thought I might want to try fiction, and I was writing short stories. And I remember the teacher made everyone who wrote fiction write a poem, and everyone who wrote a poem write fiction. And I wrote a poem, and I'd never written one before. And I was like, whoa. I got really into writing, and that's why I wanted to be a professor and write poetry, write books. And so that's why I went to graduate school. And we both had classes with Jim Tate. And
I was going to say, did you have undergrad? Yeah.
I took an undergrad class with him, and he pulled me aside one day and said, you should come to if you want to come to the MFA, you should come to the program. And I did it because it was one of the only things that really interested me. I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I was playing music for fun. So I went to graduate school, and I got funded. So it was kind of like an extended vacation. It was in the next couple of years where Northampton kind of exploded as a scene. There were a lot of clubs.
Yeah. So that's when the Scuds started.
I took a year off and stayed out in Western Mass. And I worked at a bakery or something, just a kind of a dumb job back when you could live somewhere for $200 a month, right, in a house.
Right.
And so I lived in Northampton. And while I was working there, Steve, who played in the Scud Mountain Boys, got a job as well. And so that's how we met. And I remember one of us said, you want to play sometime? And we were both kind of cagey, because you know how that can be. You play with someone and it's a shit show. And you're in trapped with them for 4 hours, and hey, we were both circling each other, but we hit it off pretty well. And I think that first day we played that Cher song, Gypsies, Tramps, and Thieves, which we later would record. And then there, so we met that way. And then another person who worked at the bakery said, you got to meet this guy, Bruce Tull. And she knew him. And so we ended up playing with him, and Bruce was 12 years older than us, and he came from a whole other era. Steve was into the Frogs and all sorts of, bluegrass, and our tastes, his and mine, definitely overlapped a great deal. Bruce was into Western swing and traditional old songwriters like Willis Allen Ramsey, and I remember him playing Muskrat Love on guitar, and Willis Allen Ramsey wrote that song. So we just sort of hit it off and just started recording, and it was all on 4 tracks and stuff like that.
When did you meet Berman? Was Berman up there pretty?
I think we started the same time. He might have started a year after me. I took No, I did it in 3 years. It was a 3-year master's. I think I did it in the right amount of time. But I seem to remember us both leaving at the same time, which would mean we probably came in at the same time.
You introduced me to him. I remember I got the Silver Jews CD at that point from him, I guess. I don't remember. We were back in Amherst or Northampton for playing, I assume. And I think that's when you introduced. I'm pretty sure you introduced me to him. I don't know how else I would have met him.
Ah, okay. I wonder if we went to a show. Must have gone to a show.
Yeah, I'm sure we were playing the Iron Horse or something like that, or maybe we were playing the UMass.
Pearl Street or something.
Yeah. And I remember around that era, early 90s, talking to you about I think the Scud Mountain Boys record. What year did that come out?
We recorded the first one in late 93, early 94. And then we recorded another one in 94, and they both came out at the beginning of 95, one in January, one in February. So we put out 2 records. Massachusetts is the third one. That's when we signed to Sub Pop off of those 2 records. And we recorded Massachusetts in 95, and it came out in 96.
All right, because you did some shows with us with the Scud Mountain Boys before the Pernice brothers, I think.
I remember that. It was in Cambridge, I think.
But I remember somewhere in those mid-90s talking to you about, like, you know, how struck I was by your lyrics. And I'm like, you know, so I said something like, did your MFA, did working on poetry, did it help? Did it inform the lyrics? And you're like, no, completely different. I said, no, I understand that poetry and songwriting are different things, but, you know, you have the gift of a poet when you write. And I felt like you were having none of it, or at least my memory of it was you were having none of that back then. You were like obstinate.
Yeah, maybe I was just being a dick. But I think what I meant to say was like, what I meant was they come from a different place for sure. It's a way different process. Every single word had to matter. If it didn't make it, you cut it. If it wasn't the right word, you got the right word. And I remember taking that even into songwriting. Like, I tried to pay attention to every word, every single word of lyrics, in, you know, for better or for worse. Maybe I overthink.
No, I think you're consistently an extraordinary lyricist.
Oh, thanks, Bill.
Whereas I feel like I wing it a lot, and especially back then, I felt like in the early days it was all stream of consciousness.
That's not nothing. That's a whole other type of thing. I don't even think I could do that. I don't think I have that in me to be that kind of free, to be honest with you. I'm too uptight.
Let me ask you this. Like, so the way I've written songs is mostly stayed the same, though it has evolved and changed, and I do different things. But like, what is your process? Do you ever go back to the written page in like a journal where you've written stuff down? Or is it like all from, does the music come first?
I never write a journal, and I rarely write anything down. It's all just memory. It's all just memory. And for me, it's always 99% the music first, and then you'll get an idea, or you'll get a word, except for like the song that I wrote, the country song that my mother came up with. That was one of the only ones that has been like the hook, the lyric first. And what about yourself?
It's rare that it all comes out at once, and when it does, it's usually something I love. Like, wow, like I felt like it's like that thing that songwriters talk about, where you just feel like you're a channel for something else. You know, like all these words poured out as I'm playing the guitar into a recorder. And I barely change anything, you know, but I couldn't necessarily always tell you what the meaning was. But my songs in particular have always been sort of opaque. And I mean, not like, Berman was always funny, but not like Malcolmus, his buddy, who was really kind of opaque, almost like by design. But it was that era where it was like, I don't know, I was really influenced by like Blonde on Blonde type Dylan, like this like it all pours out. Everything he's ingested is like sort of coming out, and somehow the symbolism of it all is coming together, I suppose. But
it'll do the work for you.
Yeah, but I never was like a precise songwriter like you are.
I never was into stories either. I don't have very many stories in a song. Like, I'm not into songs that are, about the legend of such and such. You know what I mean? I always felt like I had like, a little bit of a wispy storyline and a few images that maybe you can hang on to. Very much like I've probably wrote lyrics like poetry in a way. And I don't mean that they're poetic. I mean, I always liked imagery, and I always liked metaphor and simile and compression. Like, don't say too much. Instead of trying to cram the world into a paragraph, how about make a line be indicative of the world? You know what I mean? The other way about it, try to do something small that blossoms into something universal. That's what I think I aspire to, but I've never been like a story guy. We came out of a weird era. Like I say, my brother, who's 5 years older than me, that his era is way different than mine. Like, he couldn't believe you could put a record out that you made on a 4-track. A 4-track was what you demoed to go to the next thing, Like, all of a sudden, my first album was made for $60, which was the cost of mastering a cassette tape. Right? We slid into indie music of the 90s, where you could, you could do a lot, you could get away with a lot. When we signed to Sub Pop, we had made one record on a 4-track, one record on an 8-track. We had spent no money to make them. And we were on a label that was kind of, indie major that was just like, sure, keep doing what you're doing. Whereas had it been 10 years earlier, we would have been making demos for the rest of time. And, I don't hear the hit, that kind of thing. But it just became a good era to make music.
Yeah. We were in this sort of in-betweener time where it was like, I remember one of my earliest conversations with you, and I think I talked about this recently, was I remember having sort of a discussion with you. In my memory, it's outside of Sheehan's, and it may very well have been, but I think I was wearing overalls, blue overalls. And you're like, I think the Replacements had just been on
Saturday Night Live.
Yeah. And we talked about like what a big deal that was that they were on SNL. And but it's sort of the context for that time of like indie labels were starting to really explode. I mean, there were some really significant ones: Sub Pop, SST, Homestead, and then Matador. And then, Merge was not around yet, but there were like other ones that are gone, like Coyote for the, and Bar None and all these, and Restless, Touch and Go. I just remember like, oh man, I always try to put it in context before Nirvana for people. It's like, no, our expectations were to just be able to, if we could get a record out, period, number one, if we could get a headlining gig at TT's or something. Now, this is the era where Boston was just insane. From the 80s through the 90s, it was, we were headlining in London. I always tell people before we could even get a headlining gig in our own hometown, Boston. But it was like, I just remember when we formed the band, I think REM had just signed to Warner's, maybe Husker Du had, and Sire for the Replacements. But those were like tectonic shifts for these indie sort of snobs, So, but then 92 is when Nirvana breaks through, and then everything, of course, changes.
Everything changed. Everything. It's crazy to be part of that, for sure.
How close were you with Berman? And did you guys hang a lot in Northampton? And
yeah, we hung out a pretty good amount, but barely ever talked about music. He had the Silver Jews going. I think when I first met him, the Arizona record was out. And then he probably was recording Starlight Walker. And I think the Scud Mountain Boys had made a record at that point. But mostly I was still thinking about being a poet and being a writer. And we didn't talk too much about music. I remember going to his house and teaching him how to play a major 7th chord. He's like, what is that chord? And I was sitting in his room and showing him how to play a major 7th. We recorded with him. The Scud Mountain Boys, I guess it was after I don't know if he had officially or if he ever, I don't really know the story because I wasn't that into it. The guys from Pavement who played with him, I guess he wanted to play with other people and he asked us to record with him. So we did a session with him. We came to my house and we set up, Tom Monahan was there and he had a 1/2-inch 8-track and we set it up in the house and we played, 3 or 4 songs. I think we did The Killing Moon, which he later did, I think, or Malcolmus later did. We recorded that. We recorded 2 songs that would be on his record, The Natural Bridge, but he didn't use ours because, rightly so, they sounded too much like our band. We had a very distinct sound, and it wasn't the right thing. So I don't know if he ever destroyed the tapes. It's quite possible he just destroyed them, but maybe the reels exist somewhere. But we lost touch after he moved away, and we kept in touch here and there. We were never like super great friends, but we were certainly kept in touch. And but mostly I talked about poetry, and we told each other jokes. And he used to like to hear me swear and rant in my Boston accent. Like he's like, "Come on, call someone a cocksucker" or something like that. And I was like, "Really? All right." So I used to whatever. But we got back in touch we were closest, I would say, in the last few years before he died. I'd been in touch with him more than I had been in a while. We used to write to each other. We used to mostly just email and text. I saw him a few times on the road and stuff like that. And then Peyton, who played with me, Peyton played on a couple Jews albums, and he played in the band when they finally toured. David would never tour. And then finally, I think he decided he wanted to tour for the first time. And they toured all over the place.
It's great to see this resurgence. Like I was down, where you and I rode bikes in Woods Hole that one time.
Yep.
I'm riding my bike down there, and there's a kid of all maybe 25 wearing a Silver Jews sweatshirt. And it was just like, it's not Brooklyn. It's I'm sure he lives in Brooklyn visiting his parents in Woods Hole, or something. But it was just like, this like, I'm just this old guy riding by him on a bike. I'm like, it's just kind of like, these are people I kind of knew, but it's cool. Like I went to go see, my kids are into Pavement, and it's just to see like this resurgence and appreciation of these guys by 20-something-year-olds and younger it's like it's rewarding. Cool. Yeah.
And I think if you think about it, I remember the first time I heard a CD. Like, I don't remember when they came around, but someone in my high school had a Discman, and she let me listen to The Unforgettable Fire at lunch. And I was like, what the fuck is this? But prior to that, if you think about it, if a song left the radio, which a lot of music I listened to never saw radio, if a song wasn't getting radio play or you didn't have a copy of it, it vanished from the world, right? Now you can be, for all of the evil of streaming, as far as the disparity and the distribution of the money, the idea of it and the actual mechanics and the reality of it is, it's unbelievable. Music never goes away. So someone could pull up probably your B-sides or your alternate cuts that maybe one time were on a flexi disc that came as a beggar's giveaway. But now there it is. If someone wants to hear it, they can go find it. If you have an appetite for a type of music, think of the fix you can get, because you can hear it all whenever you want. And you can go down that rabbit hole immediately rather than schlepping to borrow a tape from somebody or trying to find a vinyl record that's is no longer around.
I'm not sure if you're tying this together with the appreciation of these bands of our peers, but I think that's what you're striking on. It's like all music exists now without being tethered to a period necessarily. Yeah.
Or the way the industry used to work. And that's not a knock on it. Like, you go into a record store and there was only so much space, right? Yeah. If your record isn't selling after a while and someone else's record needs that space, your record gets returned. And you remember what it was like when you're like, probably what would you say Let Me Come Over is the big that broke you through to a next level, right? So
pretty much.
So remember how important it was that your band was on the road when the album was in the stores, when the single was being pushed. Everything had to be done just right because there was a shelf life to that stuff. Now it's like there's a different shelf life. I'm not sure what it is, but I don't think it's about, maybe if you're in like the most high level pop music and there's huge investment in breaking it, that you have to have everything lined up exactly right. But now music, like you said, it just doesn't go away.
People disparage whatever the new format is, and streaming has certainly Spotify, let's put aside the technology, but for a while it was the technology that people were really harping on, like, oh, it's not lossless, it's MP3, but whatever it is, but I remember when CDs came out, and most CDs really kind of did sound very harsh back then because they weren't mastered properly.
I never had a CD player until I signed a record deal. I never had a CD player until I signed to Sub Pop. So I never had CDs. I had vinyl until I signed to Sub Pop and I bought a CD player, and then I went out and bought Sgt. Pepper's, and I bought Nick Drake.
Five Leaves Left.
No, I bought Way to Blue, the compilation.
So you were listening to like a lot of sort of like, English. You talked about the Jam as a kid, so that was for me as well.
Huge band.
I wasn't
for me,
into
huge.
I wasn't into the Boston hardcore scene. I think I was a little too old for that or something.
Yeah. I always liked a melody that I could hang on to, regardless of the style of music. So if it had a decent melody, but there were things that just were, made me angry in a good way that I liked. I was a kid once, but I always liked the melody, and I never stopped listening to like Burt Bacharach ever. Like I never shied away from that. There was certain Bee Gees era of the Bee Gees that I always liked. I just because I think
I hear a little bit of bread on the Scud
stuff.
Loved
loved some bread, raspberries, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But so I just always liked a song, I think, or some kind of melody I could latch on to.
Yeah. So are you writing anymore? I know you were writing for TV there for a while, but are you writing anything aside from music lately? Is there going to be another novel or no?
I have one cooked up, but I just don't feel like doing it. I mean, you're writing a lot of prose now, so you like the isolation of it? Because I don't really enjoy that part of it right now.
Well, writing nonfiction about bands is nothing like creative writing of a fiction. It's like I'm interviewing people, and there's not very much. There's not enough isolation. Like I need more isolation to actually start making cuts and revisions. But the writing it's almost like it happens itself. I'm telling a story that's already there. I don't have to make up a story.
I think that.
For me, I love trying to piece it all together, having all these different voices and trying to distill it into a story. So that's easy, but it's not like what you do for creative writing.
I don't think I'm that good at it either, to be honest with you. There's way, and I don't think I right now love it enough. And I'm having so much fun writing music, and I'm writing more music than I ever have. And I think I'm gonna stay with this for a while and see what happens.
Well, I mean, you were always sort of doing both. I mean, even when you wrote "It Feels So Good," you were still writing Pernice Brothers.
No, I didn't write it. I didn't write a single song. I said to myself, I'm putting it aside because I'm not good at multitasking. I can't do two things. I'm a scatterbrain in that regard. So if I was going to write a book, I would have to just stop writing music. So I'm not good at two things. And I'm obsessive. I never listen to my own music, but I'll play a song 150 times before I record it. And then, I'm playing it and playing it and playing it and playing it and refining it and refining it. Just, I don't write a lot of things down, but I'll just go over it and over and over it to where it'll take, I'll play 3 songs the whole day, or 4 songs, So I get kind of obsessive like that. Or if I hear a song, like I listened to From a Buick 6 one time, I think 29 times in a row. I just couldn't stop listening to it.
You mean not later in life, or like you'd always known the song, or the first time you heard it?
Not so long ago. It just hit me again of how heavy that song was to me. There was something about it. I couldn't pinpoint exactly what it is, but I could not stop listening to it. I counted. I was like, that's fucking. I just listened to it like almost 30 times over and over and over.
There's many fascinating things about Bob, but one of the fascinating things is like he started talking fairly early on in his career about like not knowing where those songs came from, not even knowing who that guy was that wrote those songs. And
I believe
do you ever feel a similar alienation or detachment from the songs you wrote?
Sometimes you think, where the fuck did that come from? But not too often. Not often. Like I don't feel like I'm some conduit or anything like that. But you do feel a buzz. Like, when you crack one, when you're writing a song and it might be eluding you, and then you crack it, and that's a kick. Like that's a jolt. That's one of my favorite things. Like I kind of live for that engagement in the song, but I don't really feel like it's from some otherworldly, but on the occasion you get like where the fuck did that come from? Or what am I talking about?
There's a great book on songwriting. Have you ever read Bill Flanagan's Written in My Soul?
No.
It's a classic. It's a classic of the genre. So it's got Dylan, it's got Richard Townsend, Keith Richards. I mean, Elvis Costello. It's amazing. I probably got it when I was in my early 20s, and just reading about like how these two different poles, you've got Keith who says, "Hey man, you put the antenna up and you just tune into the radio waves and the shit comes and here, and then I have a few words and Mick finishes it or something like that, whereas Pete Townsend was like, no, it's bullshit, man. It's like you
Bill,
gotta
excuse
go."
me. Is it
Yeah.
them talking about the songwriting in the book, or is someone writing about them?
It's Bill. No, it's all interviews with Bill Flanagan about the songwriting process.
Okay.
Yeah, I highly recommend it.
I
I
will
forget.
find it.
I mean, Randy Newman's in it, but yeah, but then Pete is like, no, it's all about craft. It's all about sitting down, and there's nothing about magical stuff about it. And it sounds like we're sort of like we both gravitate sort of one way or the other there. Like I have to be writing, I have to be playing, I don't have a song idea.
Me either.
I don't even think it ever works that way. Yeah, I have to be kind of sitting at a piano.
I have to have a guitar in my hand.
Guitar, yeah, or a piano or something. And sometimes a guitar, like too much, I have to go do something else. I mean, that's when I started using capos or other tunings.
Keep it fresh.
Something. Yeah, but for me, it's like the Buddhist thing. You have to he who digs the channels controls the waters kind of thing, So you got to be there. You got to be doing it. So it's both. It's the craft.
Yeah.
But you're much more of a craftsman. I'm much more of a.
Well,
I don't want to say hack. I don't want to be self-deprecating. But more just like a messy.
I always have to feel something, and then I will sit back and say, what can I make out of this? You know what I mean? Like they're not all true. You know what I mean? You're making something up. You're trying to evoke something. So, but it always has to come from a bit of some truth or a feeling or something I connect to emotionally, but can't just like, I remember someone saying, "Oh, write kids songs." I'm like, you can't do it. It's not easy to do yet. Those people who write good kids songs, they feel that shit, right? You know what I mean? It's like, or people who write children's books, the ones that are good, you can tell they mean it. You know what I mean? You can't fake it.
But I've written for hire before. Like we have a theme song for Mike O'Malley's NBC show right now called Extended Family. It's just a sitcom, and I did one for a show that he was on that he wasn't a showrunner for called Yes, Dear. And it's just like, it's very frustrating to work with like guys that are trying to get a message and like advertising or something like that. I mean, it's not like, to me, it doesn't feel like. Yeah. Oh, you did?
I did that for a movie. I wrote a song I had to write a 1-minute song for a scene in a movie where someone sings it. So I had to know what it was, and then, so I did do that. But what were you saying?
Well, I mean, it's both. It's. I mean, in that way, what you just said, that use is kind of. I could see that as being sort of inspirational. It's like, oh, I don't need to come up with my own prompt. Somebody's giving me a prompt. Somebody's giving me inspiration. True. Whereas, if you're writing, like I've written a theme song without words for This Old House. And I mean, it's fun, but it's fun to a point, but it's not like, for me, it's like I compartmentalize it. This is like, it's almost like a completely different job. It's not like being a musician, like the vocabulary to be able to take what they're giving me in vague and whenever you're talking to these guys, it's always something vague. Make it sound like sort of badass or whatever it is. But not too much like the Black Keys or like. And I don't want to be somebody else anyway. So it's like, well, if you're hiring me, you want something that's going to sound sort of Buffalo Tommy, somehow.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. It's very rewarding, Luke, in terms of financial reward, but it's not rewarding at all.
Yeah. I have to say I kind of enjoyed it. I've only done that one time. I had the actual music written. I didn't have any of the words, but I had been messing around with this melody and this chord change, and I hadn't finished the song, and they only wanted a minute. They were only wanted a minute anyway. So I'm like, bingo, I got it made. And then I had the storyline. And I just wrote I just went with it. But I liked it because I also knew I wasn't going to sing it, right? I knew that it would be for someone else to sing.
Yeah, for sure. And like when I've written score work for or songs that are supposed to be words for something that's actually genuinely like an inspired, like an indie film or something, that's a lot different.
Yeah.
So you were writing for TV for a while. Are you going to do that again?
I don't know. I might. I'm still in the Writers Guild, the union up here, so I could. But I don't. Again, I'm not feeling it right now, and I'd rather it has to. It was fun. I was only on one show up here in the writing room, and it was really. I enjoyed it, and I liked working with the people were great, and it was really cool to write a script and have a script made into a TV show, and you're on the set when they're shooting it, and you're like seeing it come to life. I had never done that before, so that was pretty fun. And I would do it again, but if I can write songs and make records and make music and keep doing that, like, I'm not getting any younger. So you start thinking about, like, right. I feel like I have like 4 albums written that I'd like to get out.
I love your brother opening the show the other night and saying, this is like Joe's got 9 cast-offs for every one song he's written, and here's a cast-off that he probably, I don't even know if he remembered. Did you remember it when he played it?
It was one of mine.
Yeah, you might have been like in the back room. He played a song and he said, "This is a song that Joe sent me years ago that he never did, and I finished it."
Oh my God. I was talking to my friend from a college buddy. I missed it. I didn't say anything to him. Holy shit. Now I have to freaking call him. Now that you mention it, I remember him mentioning that to me years ago, that I sent him a song and I just kind of said, I'm not going to do anything with it. And he said, can I finish it? And I didn't realize he had. Was it any good?
Oh, it was great. I mean, I've got drawers full of songs, but they're in the drawers for a reason. This didn't seem like a song that should have been cast off.
He probably did a lot of work on it.
He really did. And he's got such a beautiful voice too, and a way of playing guitar, such a gentle sort of approach. But I think you're like me, I feel like I can write the same song in 5, 6, 8 different versions. But it's a matter of like, I didn't envy Buffalo Tom back in the day because I would send them everything, pretty much everything that I thought was at least presentable, stuff that I finished, and they would choose 10 or 12 to do on a record. And I'd be like, well, what about these other 12? Like, I'm like, well, we can't do a double album of Bill's songs every time, So, but it's like, it was hard for me to let go of them. Like you sound very disciplined about that.
I'll record 20 songs and then you have to choose 10 for an album. I'm not the best at that. Like at some point, they're all the same to me. I really mean that. Like if I go through the act of finishing writing a song and recording it, and then it's done, I can't tell which song is better than another song. I might have my favorites, or the ones that I think that speak to me, like whatever. But I'm not good at picking of sequencing records and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I'm the same way. And I mean, it's good to be part of a. I mean, art by committee's rough, but I mean, we've always been a pretty great democracy in Buffalo Tom. But when you hear the people, whenever you hear whatever team you're working with, whatever the label people, blah blah blah, whoever you're working with, when they start to tell you which songs they want, oh man, that song, you're like, really, that song? It's like
that one.
Yeah, I would never guess that one. One of our biggest songs, "Tail Lights Fade," I just thought was never gonna. For me, it was one of these dark, deep album tracks. Like I didn't think that would be a song that people. Yeah,
I've just started asking other people, like, what 10 songs out of these would you pick? And invariably, they're always different than what I would have picked. I focus grouped it quite a bit on this last record, quite a bit, because I had no clue. I was just like, I don't know. I think we retracked 15 or songs and cut a few from it. But I also am I'm not a good engineer, but I'm getting better at it, because you know how you said, what about those other songs? Like the ones that don't make your record? I want to still record them. Like there's some that might not make this record, but I think they could be on a record. Or I just feel like I want to document them, whether I give them away for free or whether I do them. I hate to have them go, like songs disappear. And I think as the older I get, the more of them I want to get down, because
you should.
I'm in my 50s, so I don't want, you start thinking, how many more years am I going to do this?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of songs. We've got 10 records now, and plus a couple of solo records, and there are songs that I've forgotten about that are on records that I totally forgot about those. But meanwhile, there are songs that I haven't recorded that are still nagging at me.
Yeah, but me, I feel like I have to empty the pipes. Like I feel backed up. Like sometimes I finish recording and I say to myself, I never have to think about that song again, and it's like a relief. It's like a real relief.
Yeah, you need a fiber supplement to sort of
exactly.
All right, Joe.
Hey, wait, so I didn't even ask you about your Cars book.
Oh, yeah. So, I'm working on the Cars book.
So where are you at with that? That's awesome because I mean, I don't read a ton of music, books on music, mostly because, like I said, reading is a challenge for me. So if I do read, I'm tend to be reading like stuff on biking and mechanical stuff. But so where are you at?
I've been reading more and more music books in the last 5 years or so since I've been writing more music books. And because I want to know, like, Will Hermie's Lou Reed book, or I want to know the good ones that are coming out. I always wanted to read the ones of the bands that meant the most to me. But now I'm more like even casually reading about bands I don't even necessarily love. And that was also like with documentaries there for a while. It's like, I don't need to, I've never liked Iron Maiden really, but that Iron Maiden documentary is fantastic. It's about the human relationships and the balance. But yeah, I'm at this point in the book where
wait, let me back you up. Why'd you pick the Cars?
Well, it's a good question. I was looking for another book to do after my Stones book, which was the last book I had done was 2013 before the Leon Russell book. But I had been working with this agent in New York who really liked that Stones book for 6, 7, 8, 9 years, like whatever, to try to come up with another idea. And I don't want to do this. I don't do this full time. I don't ghostwrite. I don't just take any projects. That's something I do as a labor of love. So I was waiting around for the right idea. And while I was doing that, I played this benefit guitar at this thing called the Wild Honey Benefit out in LA. And it's the kind of benefit where it's like, oh, they're doing a tribute to the Beach Boys, and like Brian Wilson himself shows up, It's this crazy benefit. So the guy that asked me to come out and do it, I was like, yeah, thrilled. He's like, well, you can have like maybe Pete Thomas on the drums, and how about Elliot Easton on guitar? And so I had Elliot Easton on guitar, and I actually had Dennis Dykin from the Smithereens on drums, and crazy, like some Wallflowers guys on keyboard, Jordan Summer, and just this great resource, like to tap into these great LA musicians. So I had pitched this idea. I mean, Elliot is just like one of these guys whose heart is on his sleeve. He's just he's like a Long Island guy like myself. And I think he hits it off with everybody, but we just hit it off.
Had you met him before, or was that your first meeting?
No. The first night in rehearsal hall, I just went up to him and said, hey, I'm the guy with blah, blah, blah. And they had just gotten inducted. They had learned that they were going to be inducted to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame finally. So I asked, hey, congratulations. And he was like tearing up, talking about what it meant to him and his mother and being a musician. And so, but Rick Ocasek was still alive, and he was still very much in charge of this whole thing. So I had said to Elliot, hey, I wrote this article about the experience, and he loved it. And I said, what about doing a Cars book? Because I think they're one of the most important bands that has not been covered in a book since like 86, like. That's
what I was wondering. There's a hole there probably, right?
Yeah. I mean, some guy this guy named Joe Milliken wrote a book about Ben Orr of all subjects, just Ben, kind of covered a lot of the Cars, but it was mostly just kind of, it's almost like an oral history of people talking about Ben. So, but David Robinson came from the Modern Lovers, and like that alone is like a story, and all these guys, and so I just wanted to, but Rick didn't want to, he didn't know who I was. He wanted to maybe go with like a bigger name, I'm sure. So, but then he passed away, and in the interim, I did the Leon book, and then I stoked the idea again, and all the 3 surviving members have been participating, cooperating with me, and giving me endless interviews. So it's been great.
That's awesome. And so, where are you at with it? Is it done?
I'm at the point where I hate myself for all the stuff I've written, and now I have to go back. Now I have to go back and start bringing it down to something more palatable. I mean, as big as the Leon Russell book was, it was probably almost a third or more bigger than it was when I handed it in its manuscript, because I thought I would have this collaboration with my editor, Brant Rumble, a great name, Brant Rumble at Hachette. Yeah. But he was more like, this is, what do you think you're doing handing this in? This is his first email back to me was, this is not a book. And it wasn't, but I thought we would start to get into the back and forth. Now I'm more like, okay, don't write too much to begin with, but yeah, I'm a chip away type guy. I have to put a lot of clay out there and chip. That's just the way I write.
Norman from the fan club, it reminds me of Norman said when I recorded with him, the fan club had an expression called underdubbing, where you record all the shit and then you underdub. You just start peeling stuff away.
Taking it out, yeah.
So underdubbing, that's what you're doing, an underdub. So are you close?
No, I'm just through my first draft, really. I just interviewed Paulina Porizkova this past week, and I've gotten all the sort of key interviews that I wanted to get. And that's a big part of it. I got to say, when I was really sort of nervous when I started doing music books, about interviewing. I'm so used to being interviewed, but I was never like, oh my God, I'm going to talk to so-and-so from, but I was like, it becomes an addiction. Interviewing becomes an addiction. You could probably tell by the way I'm talking.
Especially the stories you must hear, especially if you're fascinated by the subject, like you're writing a book about them, for Christ's sake. And then you're talking to people who are either in the band or people who were, were right there. Of course, it must be, you might just want to talk all day.
And once you talk to like Elton John, like I did for the Leon book, then it's like, okay, Bruce Springsteen is not so much of a big deal. I got he is a big deal. I was nervous before all those guys, but Willie Nelson, Randy Newman, and then they're just people that want to talk about, especially during COVID, everybody's home. They just wanted to talk about Leon and talk about songs and business, and it was great.
Thanks for listening to the Talkhouse Podcast, and thanks to Joe Pernice and Bill Janovitz for chatting. If you liked what you heard, please follow Talkhouse on your favorite podcasting platform, and make sure to check out all the goodness at talkhouse.com. This episode was produced by Myron Kaplan, and the Talkhouse theme is composed and performed by The Range. See you next time.